Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cima SCS Strategic Case Study E3 Essentials Revision, segment number 5. This is a segment that I'm going to do in two parts. It's a very important segment as well. It covers almost about 4 chapters in your entire E3 syllabus, and it's highly critical in terms of the understanding we need. This is managing change. Let's have a look. Before we dive into the content, quick reminder on what you must do. Please have a notebook and pen on the ready. Follow the slides and my explanation carefully. Make notes as you deem necessary. Please maintain a list of key topics that you feel you're weak at so you can self-revise later. Maintain a list of key performance and management tools that can help modeling answers in the strategic case study. On that note, let's try and understand how we can manage change. But in the first segment, our primary focus will actually be understanding the different perspectives and the different elements associated to change. The thing about change is that change is inevitable. Strategic implementation almost always requires change, and change can have significant impact on overall organizational culture. Change is also faced by resistance in most cases. Therefore, effective management of change is critical for long-term success of any organization. And in order to do this, we need to try and understand how we can be an effective change leader. How do we understand organizational culture so we can tune it carefully? What are the different types of change? What exactly is resistance to change? And how can we manage times of turbulence, right? Times of decline. So many things to learn about change itself. So elements related to change within the first segment, or first part of this segment, we will look at the various triggers, which basically look at all of these factors, the different types of change we have, what exactly is culture and how exactly do we look at culture. How can we determine the importance of culture, and through the cultural web and the McKinsey 7S frameworks, and of course the resistance factors, right? The idea of resistance to change. So let's continue this discussion. First of all, what are the different types of change that exist? So there are so many opinions about this, right? There are so many classifications. But one that we closely associate is the matrix of classifying change in terms of the extent and the speed. So as far as the extent of change is concerned, it can be either transformation or realignment, whereas the speed can be incremental or a big bang, right? Which is an extreme word to say revolutionary change. So when you have a combination of transformational incremental change, you call it evolution. When you have a realignment with incremental speed, you call it adaptation. When you realign but at a big bang level, you call it reconstruction. And when you are transformational at a big bang speed, you call it revolution. So let's take a closer look at each of them. Evolution is simply the transformational change implemented gradually through interlinked or interrelated initiatives, likely to be proactive change undertaken in participation of the need for future change. Whereas realignment, adaptation is where change is undertaken to realign the way in which the organization operates, implemented in a series of steps. So both of these are not hasty. There is an incremental approach, series of steps, step-by-step approach to these two. Realignment is more going slow change, right? It's going with what you have but slowly changing, whereas transformational is the aspect of trying to change a few things drastically, but you don't do it in one step, you do it in a few steps, and that is what you call evolution. So even if you want to, you can look at it from the Darwinian theory perspective as well, because human beings are said to be both evolving, also adapting in their physiology and in various other forms as well. Then let's take a look at the Big Bang side to things under transformational and realignment. Revolution is where transformational change that occurs through simultaneous initiatives on many fronts, more likely to be forced and reactive because of the changing competitive conditions that the organization is facing. As opposed to reconstruction, where change is undertaken to realign the way in which the organization operates with many initiatives implemented simultaneously. Many simultaneously. Here, simultaneous initiatives. And so that's a key difference between revolution and reconstruction. Now, reconstruction is often forced and reactive because of a changing competitive context. So, to best understand types of change, I would say if you can think back, if you can go back and think about situations or examples of situations where you have undergone change, and have you had the freedom to use incrementalist approaches, or have you had to use Big Bang? Have those changes been transformational or realignment? Think of a few instances and classify the process that you took or the type of change that you undertook into each of the 4 classifications. This is a really effective way of classifying the various types of change. Moving on. Organizational culture. Now, I believe from what we note usually that culture is the fundamental factor that is the backbone of whether change is enabled or disabled. So we have to have a very thorough understanding of culture. Now, dissecting organizational culture, we learn it through 2 approaches. One is the McKinsey 7S framework, where McKinsey pitched that there are 7 S's ultimately that determine how an organizational culture is created, how an organizational culture, what an organizational culture includes. Now, there are definitely 3 hard S's and 3 soft S's, all connected with 1 S. The hard S's are strategy, structure, and systems. The soft S's are referred to as skills, staff, and style. So these 3 are basically S's that can be influenced by management, right? Senior management can directly influence and change these things. They have a certain amount of control over strategy, structure, and systems. But why we call these the soft S's are because the skills of people, the style, and the staff themselves as people, as human beings, these things are not easily controllable, not easily influenced. They have their own way of integrating into the organizational culture. So strategy is what should we do to solve specified problems. Structure is what structure do we need to execute the strategy. Systems is what business systems do we need to use or invent to execute strategy. Whereas in terms of the soft S's, skills, what are the specific skills that will help us? What skills do we need to develop? Staff, how should we help our managers in their growth? And the people, style, what leadership style and cultural qualities will help us to achieve a strategic objective, right? So hard S's and the soft S's. This is McKinsey 7S, and you can ideally look at a company and identify or separate an organization into these 7 S's. The second tool or the second perspective, second opinion that we learn as a tool to dissect culture is very famous, the cultural web. So here we identify culture to be made of 6 components: stories, symbols, stories and myths, sometimes symbols, rituals and routines, power structures, organizational culture, and controls. So stories are essentially what past events people talk about inside and outside the organization, success or failures, who and what are heroes or heroines of the company, right? Who are the heroes, who are the heroines of the company? Well, I hope you associate yourself a lot to these ideas. And the symbols, the organizational semiotics, including the logos, how grand the offices are, plus formal or informal dress codes, even the tags that you wear carry a certain amount of symbolic gestures and symbolic reputation, right? So I used to have the privilege to wear some highly recognized tags, and I used to I remember the kind of association people make to people who wear those tags. So symbols are quite the projected outlook, the materialistic and the projected outlook, the logos and the brands that are used to show you're associated with a certain culture. Rituals and routines, behavior and rules that signal importance. So what's supposed to happen in given situations and what's valued by management. The rituals and routines, the power structures, the pockets of real power and influence over decisions, operations and direction. This can include social power. Organizational structure is important. This includes the formal structure and relationships that dictate whose contributions are most valued. And finally, controls, internal control systems relating to, example, finance, performance quality, and rewards or salaries. So these are the 7 components that make up the culture of an organization according to the culture or the cultural web. And these two, McKinsey's 7S and the cultural web, are the 2 tools that we use as perspectives, as lenses to identify or classify or dissect or learn more about organizational culture. On that note, let's look at the idea of resistance to change. Now, resistance is basically any attitude or behavior that reflects a person's unwillingness to make or support a desired change. So if you look at reasons for resisting change, there can be so many reasons, right? There can be job factors like fear of technological employment, fear of changes to working conditions, fear of demotion or reduced pay. There could also be social factors on the other side. Dislike, need to break up current social environment, personal dislike of people implementing change. There could be lack of consultation leading to the rejection of change, right? And regardless of these two, there can be personal factors also, like implied criticism of current working method, feeling less valued, and work becoming more monotonous, right? So these are 3 aspects of how you can approach understanding why people or why employees resist change. And you have to identify whenever you're trying to implement something, and if it is not happening at a pace that is reasonably good for the company, it means that there is someone resisting somewhere. So a shrewd change leader will pay attention to resistance of change and carefully, diplomatically deal with those. Now, resistance may take many forms, including active or passive, overt or covert, individual or organized, aggressive or timid. For each source of resistance, management needs to provide an appropriate response. So this is one way to understand how we can respond to change resistance in terms of identifying a few sources. Just a few examples, right? There can be the need for security and the familiar, having the opinion that no change is needed, or trying to protect vested interests. These can be places where the resistance is stemming from. Possible responses, we can provide information and encouragement and invite for involvement, right? Inclusivity. Clarify the purpose of the change and how it will be made. So communication. Demonstrate the problem or the opportunity that makes changes desirable. I have always been someone who has strived to change things in all the corporates I have worked with, and my goodness, when I started early on, I was so naive. I was so blind to understanding how to go about the whole thing, and I was an utter failure in trying to push certain changes early on. But as I moved forward, I realized there are so many practical sides to think about, and deepness, right? You need to dig deep and figure out the root cause of the resistance. Sometimes what we see on the outset is not really the reason for change. It could be something like the need for security, and it's not even implied, right? It's not even explicitly visible. We don't even know that that is where this request is coming from. So it's very important to have an open line of communication when you're especially trying to manage change. On that note, Cotter and Schlesinger actually proposed a few reasons, their own opinions of reasons for resisting change. According to Cotter and Schlesinger, there are 4 reasons that explain why certain people resist change. It can be because of parochial self-interest. Some people are concerned with the implication of the change for themselves and how it may affect their own interests rather than considering the effects for the success of the business. So you could plainly say this could be selfishness, but it is beyond that. It is also fear. It is stemmed from a lot of emotions. This is one reason. Misunderstanding, right? There can be communication gaps, inadequate information, right? Inadequate transparency levels that lead to resistance. Third is low tolerance to change. Certain people are very keen on security and stability in their work, right? And fourth one, different assessments of the situation. Some employees may disagree on the reasons for the change and on the advantages and disadvantages of the change process itself. So this is Cotter and Schlesinger's opinion about the 4 reasons why people resist change. And as a response itself, they set out the following change approaches to deal with resistance. So as methods of overcoming resistance, they said that we can use participation, right? Getting people involved, getting people to participate in the entire process. We can use education and communication. Educate the people who are relevant, who are in the team, who are resisting change, and communicate with them. Maintain an open line of communication, discuss, talk, and exchange ideas. Obviously, on the other side, you can also use facilitation and support. Some people just need that. Some people are not even having severe opinions about change. They just need some facilitation. They just need someone to guide the way, some support to go along with the change, because they have no personal opinions or judgments about the change initiative. So facilitation and support. On this side, negotiation can be very helpful. You can use it as a tool to really just use communication, use various bargaining powers to exchange in a very positive note. I'm saying this to negotiate certain outcomes and drive change forward. So those are all very positive approaches. Other than that, when things turn to worse, you obviously have things like manipulation and co-optation, where you just be very smart and shrewd and cunning, and you manipulate certain people. You give out, you withhold information, you take things little by little, you take things not really slow, but you get different people to execute different terms, you separate people, you play the game in a very smart manner, which can always go wrong also. So either way, it is a form of using power, and it would be coming from a place, from either an egotistical place within the team, or someone with holding a lot of power. And that is where power and coercion can help ultimately, because if it has to happen, and if the CEO says it, if it has to happen, it must, right? So that sort of approach also can be taken as a method of overcoming resistance. And that is pretty much the initial elements of managing change, or rather change understanding itself, that we looked at. We will be moving on to management of change itself in the second part of this segment. That is where a load of the things related to change as Cima students are available, because we as chartered management accountants, we are supposed to have excellent leadership skills, and one of the critical aspects to being a good leader is how we manage and how we drive change. Is it not? Until I see you next time, thank you.